Hello everyone! A deafening boom echoed through the crowded square. The earth shakes violently, throwing shoppers off balance and toppling fish and meat stalls. People scream and point to Mount Vesuvius, which raises a massive cloud above them. Around noon, on August 24th, 79 AD, a huge eruption started from Mount Vesuvius, throwing volcanic debris over the city, followed the next day by clouds of hot gas. Buildings were destroyed, the population was crushed or asphyxiated, and the city was buried under a blanket of ash and lava. About this tragic fate of the city of Pompeii, we'll be talking in today's video. About the stories of the people who lived here, and about how a normal life, maybe even monotonous at times, turned into a nightmare from which many could not wake up. But their tragedy opens a small door for us to look back in time and try to understand what life looked like a few thousand years ago. In the area where today we walk among the ruins of the city of Pompeii, the first proof of habitation comes from the Osci people, which were not yet sedentary, but which occupied a strategic position on the high plateau, overlooking the sea. The plateau was formed by an old lava flow of Vesuvius, near the mouth of the Sarno River, an excellent water source. Given the lack of springs in the area, the first stable settlements in the area, however, were 5 villages, dating back to around the 8th century BC, and which were founded by the Osci people. These first settlements were united in a single settlement surrounded by defensive walls around the 6th century BC. This helped them to control an important road access and what can, in a certain sense, be considered the beginning of the city of Pompeii. And also, around this time, the foundations of sea trade in the area were laid, with the construction of a small port located near the mouth of the river. With the arrival of the Greeks in Campania, Pompeii also came under Greek rule, around 740 BC, after the Greeks founded the colony of Pitekusa on the islands of Ischia and Cumea between 780 and 770 BC, although Pompeii was never militarily conquered. And after the Greeks came the Etruscans in the Campania plain, who founded Capua. The Etruscans were looking for a connection with the interior of the territory, so they also settled in the area of Pompeii, finding in the Sarno River the communication route between the sea and the interior. As the Greeks, the Etruscans did not conquer the city militarily, but simply limited themselves to controlling it. During this period, in fact, Pompeii enjoyed a kind of autonomy. And from here, Pompeii returned under the influence of the Greeks. Then came under the influence of the Samnites and finally under that of the Romans. Throughout the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, Pompeii enjoyed a certain autonomy, and the city experienced its period of maximum flourishing, when the Forum and numerous buildings, both public and private, of high architectural quality were built. And above all rose Mount Vesuvius, a sleeping giant whose wooded slopes masked a heart of fire. No one remembered it ever erupting. To the inhabitants of Pompeii, he was a silent guardian, not a harbinger of disaster. Did you know, on February 5th, 62 AD, a violent earthquake with an estimated intensity of 5 to 6 on the Mercalli scale, with the epicenter near Stabiae, also hit Pompeii. causing significant damage. The earthquake had a negative impact on the life of the city, with many of the wealthiest personalities fearing for their safety and moving to other areas, while trade fell sharply. Pompeii thus became a construction site, where the main activity was that of reconstruction. There was no shortage of real estate speculations, and many became rich from rents and construction or contracts for restoration works. It's not known if the emperors Nero or Vespasian financed the reconstruction in any way, but what is certain is that the wealth accumulated over the years by the inhabitants favored the construction of luxurious buildings, often covered in marble. In the decade that followed the earthquake, however, there was no shortage of political and administrative turmoil. Vespasian was forced to send the tribune Titus Suerius Clemens to Pompei in order to resolve some situations related to the illegal possession of municipal lands by private individuals. And if this sounds familiar to you, it's because nothing is new under the sun, and history repeats itself. So it would be good if we could learn something from it. It is important to know that the repairs started after the earthquake of 62 AD were not completed by the time of the eruption, which makes it difficult to distinguish between the damage caused by the earthquake and that caused by the eruption of the volcano in 79 AD. Did you know, almost 2000 years ago, Pompeii was a bustling city located in what is now southwestern Italy. But in the summer of 79 AD, the nearby volcano, Vesuvius, erupted, spewing smoke and toxic gas up to a height of 30 kilometers, which soon spread to the city. There were earthquakes in the days before the eruption, but no one seemed to have paid much attention to them. After the volcano erupted for the first time, shortly in the afternoon, the thick ash made everything black, and people couldn't even see the sun. Some residents fled the city, while others chose to take shelter in their homes, in the hope that it would all be over soon, but the ash continued to fall, until in some places it reached 9 meters in height, blocking doors, collapsing roofs, and suffocating those who did not choose to flee. Around midnight, the first of 4 hot clouds of ash, rock and toxic gas rushed from the volcano, traveling towards Pompeii at about 289 kilometers per hour. The wave burned everything in its path. Around 7 a.m., almost 19 hours after the initial eruption, the city was completely covered in a fatal mixture of ash and rock. The next day, clouds of hot gases followed. Vesuvius, the once innocent mountain, had revealed its true nature, a stratovolcano born from the clash between the African and Eurasian tectonic plates, a destroyer and a conserver at the same time. Did you know? In fact, the eruption of the Vesuvius volcano was not on August 24th, 79 AD. It is assumed that it happened later, in the autumn months, probably October or November. It was believed that August 24th, 79 AD was the exact date of the eruption, but this is not the case. The widespread belief has been refuted by curious discoveries that allude to a more autumnal setting. The stalls in the market apparently contained common autumn foods, such as chestnuts, unripe pomegranates and grapes, as well as other findings, such as warm clothes, heaters, and inscriptions, all dating the event closer to October or November. Did you know? The only eyewitness account of the eruption that we have came from Pliny the Young, the grandson of Pliny the Elder. A vivid eyewitness account is preserved in 2 letters written by Pliny the Young to the historian Tacitus, who inquired about the death of Pliny the Elder, the commander of the Roman fleet at Misenum. Pliny the Elder hurried to help the stricken population and to see the volcano phenomenon up close and died at Stabiae. For centuries, Pompei slept, forgotten under a thick layer of ash. But Vesuvius didn't sleep for long. It erupted again in 203 AD, then in 472, and in 512, placing successive blankets of ash over the city. Throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the mountain smoldered as a reminder of nature's wrath. Then, in 1592, a curious glimmer broke out. Domenico Fontana, a Spanish engineer, dug a channel near the buried city and came across stone walls. But this discovery was shrouded in secrecy and quickly abandoned. It was not until the middle of the 18th century, when the excavations resumed, that Pompeii slowly began to rise from the ashes. "15 years after the excavations resumed, an inscription was found, Re Publicae Pompeianorum, confirming what has been whispered for a long time. The city under the ash was Pompeii. The work in the city in the mid-18th century marked the beginning of the modern science of archaeology. Under the patronage of Don Carlos, King of Naples, the military engineer, Carl Weber conducted systematic studies from 1750 to 1764. But other early excavations were often haphazard and irresponsible, carried out by treasure hunters or other untrained workers. The random excavations were stopped in 1860, when the Italian archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli became the director of the excavations. The areas of the excavated sites have been carefully cleaned and documented. Pompeii was divided into 9 regions. Each region was numbered, and each door on the street was given a number, so that each house could be conveniently located with 3 digits. Fiorelli looked into the gaps left behind by the decomposed corpses in the ash, and, in a moment of brilliance, poured liquid plaster into the gaps. What came to light were faces frozen in time, mothers protecting their children, lovers hugging, and citizens screaming in terror. These plaster casts, raw and disturbing, gave voice to the voiceless, and brought back to life the last hours of the city of Pompeii. The technique is still used, and today it creates an unbroken thread between the past and the present. In the 20th century, another hero took over the baton. Amadeo Mauri, tireless and unstoppable, he revealed vast areas south of Villa dell'Abbondanza. He revealed bakeries where bread once rose, fooleries where clothes were dyed, workshops, shops, and vibrant inscriptions calling citizens to vote or cheer for their favorite gladiators. In 1997, the world responded to the call of the city of Pompeii. The city, along with Herculaneum and Torre Annunziata, have been declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Pompeii was reborn as a global treasure, an eternal classroom, a temple of memory, a city of echoes. Today we roam the reborn streets of Pompeii, each stone whispering a story. The streets are ingeniously designed from large slabs of volcanic rock from Mount Vesuvius. while the sidewalks, which are usually about 30 centimeters high, were covered in a mixture of broken terracotta and lime cement. An interesting feature is the so-called pedestrian crossings, made of stone slabs of equal height to the sidewalks, placed across the street. They allow the pedestrians to cross the street without getting wet or dirty, as the streets were often dirty due to the lack of proper sewage. However, the slabs were laid in such a way that the carts could still pass, as can be seen from the ditches left on the road by the carts' wheels. The two theaters of Pompeii are located in the same area of the ancient city. The Teatro Grande, the Great Theater, is an open-air amphitheater where Greco-Roman plays were performed. The smaller Odeon was used for poetry and musical performances, which required less space for better acoustics. Tip: sit in the middle of the audience stage and speak in a normal voice. You will hear your own voice amplified, as if you were speaking into a microphone. From here we go to Casa del Fauno, the House of the Faun, one of the largest and most spectacular houses in Pompeii, covering about 3,000 square meters, with areas dedicated to the owners of the villa and other areas for the servants. The name comes from the bronze satyr statue in the impluvium, a small pool for collecting rainwater. The villa has a number of statues, frescoes and mosaics. Among the most famous is the mosaic depicting Alexander the Great fighting Darius and the Perseians at Issos, now on display at the National Museum of Archaeology in Naples. The next stop will be at Villa dei Misteri, the Villa of Mysteries. Discovered between 1909 and 1910, this is one of the most captivating and mysterious in the entire archaeological park. It was most likely owned by the family of Istachiri, who were one of the most powerful in Pompeii during the reign of Augustus. The building dates back to the 1st century BC, and it was built in the western residential area outside the city walls, overlooking the sea. It was renovated several times before the eruption of 79 AD and is named after the Hall of Mysteries, a triclinium dining room decorated with an extraordinary and enigmatic cycle of paintings measuring 17 by 3 meters. The scenes appear to be depicting a Dionysian ritual of initiation into worship, with the gods Dionysus and Aphrodite, or Ariadne, in the center of the back wall. And from Villa dei Misteri we go to the Forum of Pompeii, one of the most striking places in the ancient city, consisting of a large square with a triumphal arch, public buildings, a basilica, mensa ponderalia, weights and measurements, temples and buildings dedicated to Apollo, Jupiter. The head of the former statue, dating from around 80 BC, still stands here. Public lairs, tutelary deities of the city, and the Eumachia building. The main civic, religious, and commercial activities of the city took place here in the Forum, and, as in all cities of the Roman imperial era, the space was open only to pedestrians, without wheeled vehicles. Don't be fooled by the name. In Roman times, a basilica was the most important public building in the city, used as a kind of courtroom where the judge sat on a platform raised above the crowd. It was also a place where commercial contracts were drawn up. The space, dating back to the 2nd century BC, resembled a covered forum with columns and could be used for civic, religious, and commercial functions in case of bad weather. This important sacred temple, dedicated to Venus, the protector of the city and navigation, was established in the second half of the 2nd century BC on the plain of Pompeii, facing the Sarno Valley and the sea. In the first half of the 1st century BC, the building reached its peak of splendor with a series of extensions, renovations, and marble decorations. The temple housed a large golden lamp, probably donated for the worship by Nero and his wife Pompeia, which is now on display at the National Archaeological Museum in Naples. The Temple of Apollo, also known as the Sanctuary of Apollo, is a Roman temple dedicated to the Greek and Roman god Apollo, one of the oldest places of worship. The temple occupies a very strategic position along the path leading to the Navy Gate, which leads to the heart of the city. Between the 3rd and the 2nd centuries, the temple was renovated and took on a Neronian architectural style. The gladiatorial games and theatrical performances that honored Apollo and his sister Diana took place here in the glory days. And next to the Forum, we find the bathhouses that are beautifully and well preserved to this day. Although these baths are relatively small compared to other ruins in Pompeii, they are undoubtedly the most elegant. The Forum bathhouses had separate sections for men and women, including separate entrances. The Stabian Baths are the oldest and largest of the 5 public baths in Pompeii. The original construction dates back to 125 BC. Since then, until the eruption of Vesuvius, the bath complex had been remodeled several times. Like all typical Roman baths, the Stabian Baths had separate showers for men and women. The facilities offered by the bathhouses included a dressing room, a cold room, a hot room, and a swimming pool. The women's rooms did not have a cold room. Instead, they had a pool of cold water. Visiting the baths provides an interesting insight into the daily life in the ancient city. From the baths, we go to the small fountain house, which was once the home of a wealthy family. The villa has amazing architecture, preserved frescoes, and a famous fountain. The fountain is an important reason why tourists come here, decorated with colorful mosaics and shells and a small bronze statue. The fountain is an excellent example of a simple but beautiful Roman architecture, a popular fashion feature in ancient times. It displays incredible details that the Pompeians used to put into their work. Palestra is the Latin word for hall. The big palestra comprises of a large open-air square, surrounded by porticos, with a swimming pool in the center. The area is surrounded by a high wall. Centuries-old plane trees lined the 3 sides of the courtyard, but all that remains of the trees today are the reminiscences of their roots. Built in the Augustinian period at the beginning of the 1st century AD, the courtyard was used as a sports hall for physical and intellectual training of the young citizens of Pompeii. Today, the Palestra hosts the permanent exhibition dedicated to the frescoes and artifacts found in the Moregine Triclinium complex. Next is the Vettii House. Excavated between 1894 and 1895, it was one of the richest and most famous houses in Pompeii. The house belonged to the brothers Aulus Vettius Conviva and Aulus Vettius Restitutus, who became rich through trade. In the Augustan era, the house was restructured. The decorated rooms overlooked the open courtyard, which had statues with water jets. The main productive activities of those times were carried out in the living room, such as selling wine, cleaning clothes, making jewelry, and creating perfumes. We are going to the house of the tragic poet. This is best known for the mosaic that reads Cave Canem, which translates to Be aware of the dog, at the main entrance. The atrium of the house features paintings and fine mosaics, including one with actors seen preparing for a play. This mosaic became the inspiration for the building's name. The living room features mythological paintings, including episodes of the Iliad. The most visible of these is the one depicting Ariadne being abducted by Theseus on the wall opposite the sail of Cupid. The Temple of Isis is located east of the small theater and is dedicated to the Egyptian goddess whose cult was famous in the Roman Empire. The temple was built in the 2nd century BC, but was destroyed by an earthquake and completely rebuilt. The temple stands on a raised base in the center of a courtyard surrounded by porticos. The temple is dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Isis, who finds body parts of her husband Osiris and revives him. The cult was especially popular among the lower classes of Pompeii. The Antiquarium was built by Giuseppe Fiorelli between 1873 and 1874 in the region between the terrace of the Temple of Venus overlooking Porta Marina. It is an exhibition site for a selection of findings from Pompeii that depict the daily life of the ancient city, as well as casts of the victims of the eruption. Pompeii lives on, not just in the stone and ash, but in every visitor who walks its streets, in every scientist who reads its walls, and in every heart who hears its story. And not far away, Vesuvius remains imposing, brooding, with green and lively slopes, but its core is always in motion. With a height of 1,281 meters, its last eruption took place in 1944, during the chaos of the Second World War. Scientists monitor it daily, aware that the fire sleeps lightly beneath the surface. And with today's last look at the volcano, today's video ends. And next time we'll see you again near Vesuvius, but this time we'll go to Herculaneum to learn more about the history of this ancient city. Perhaps not as well known as Pompeii, but just as interesting and full of stories. So, don't forget to subscribe to the channel by smashing that subscribe button to find out when the next video from Herculaneum pops up. And if you like today's video, like it and share it with others so they can find out interesting things about the next place you're thinking of visiting.